Okay, Adrian, there's nobody in the waiting room, so it looks like the popcorn has stopped popping.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning. So just want to get started with a little introduction here. Thanks to everybody for joining us. This is our first program launch webinar for the Brisbane Building Efficiency Program. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to ask everybody to please keep yourselves muted until we get to the Q&A portion at the end of the session. If you do have any questions while we're going through the presentation, please feel free to put those in the chat and we will monitor those there. And just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and the slides and recording will be made available on the city's website after the presentation, likely early next week. So with that, Mark, can we go ahead and have the next slide? So just a quick overview of our agenda here. I will begin with a quick program introduction and background. We'll go over an overview of benchmarking and talk about who is required to comply with our ordinance. Then we'll spend some time on compliance steps, talk a little bit about the program resources that we currently have available and some that will be coming. And then we'll have some time for Q&A and just close with a wrap up and next steps. Before we move on, we'd like to get a sense of who's in the room here. So please go ahead, Mark, and we're gonna launch a poll or a series of polls to see who we have in the room. And then while you're answering those questions, I'd just like to introduce our program team. So I'm with the City of Brisbane. I'm the Sustainability Manager and managing the Brisbane Building Efficiency Program. We have Nyla Kusar, who is our Building Efficiency Program Fellow, supporting the program this year in our launch. We also have Karen Kinzer from the City of Brisbane as our Deputy Director of Public Works. And then we have our team from the Energy Coalition, our consultants who've been helping us along this journey, Mark Costa and Ivana Doran. All right, how are we doing on the poll, Mark?
Yeah, we'll give it another 10 seconds and then we'll show the results. So far, I think most people have replied, so thanks. All right, 5 seconds and we'll win the poll.
Great, so it looks like we have a majority of the attendees today familiar with the concept of benchmarking buildings. About evenly split, those who have and those who have not benchmarked a building before. Most of our participants are building owners, managers, or representatives, with a few additional service providers and government representatives. One other, please go ahead and tell us who you are in the chat.
And just maybe people can also do the raise the hand function. I saw a couple of chats about not being able to hear. Can anybody use the raise the hand feature to just confirm the audio is coming through? Or maybe Karen or Nyla, can you just confirm that?
I'm hearing fine.
Okay, great. Chat us directly, chat the hosts. Thanks if you're having audio trouble and we can try and troubleshoot that.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna go ahead and assume, since we have a couple confirmations, that we should go ahead and continue, and hopefully those who can't hear can get your audio worked out. Mark, let's go ahead to the next slide. So just a little bit of background on our program goals. The primary goal here is to reduce the environmental impact of our local built environment by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, energy, and water use to help meet our city climate goals. But there are also a lot of secondary benefits or co-benefits that include building occupant comfort, safety, and health, improving the value of a building, both as an asset as well as the cost of running a building, and increasing its resilience to future climate impacts or rising energy and water costs. Informing decision makers about improvement opportunities that can be both on the owner and occupant level, as well as for us as city staff and city leaders to understand how we can help tailor new programs within the community, supporting clean energy and decarbonization, data transparency and market transformation as future owners and lessees have information to guide choices about what buildings they locate themselves in, and also green job creation as the need for building auditors, energy service providers, and equipment providers grows. So we really see this program as being a great opportunity both for the city as well as for building owners and the clean energy industry as a whole. Next slide. So this program was really born out of a statewide program called legislation from 2016, California AB 802, which allows building owners or their representatives to request building level energy data from utilities, and also requires commercial buildings 50,000 square feet or larger to benchmark their buildings with Energy Star Portfolio Manager and report to the California Energy Commission. This legislation also allows for local governments to be able to take this farther. And that's what we have done in Brisbane, and a number of other cities have done around the state. Brisbane's Climate Action Plan, adopted in 2015, identified existing buildings as a priority. You can see here our community greenhouse gas inventory from 2015. And this dark blue section here is our commercial, industrial, and direct access energy, 30% of our local emissions, second only to transportation emissions. So in 2018, we applied for and received a grant from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District that allowed us to hire the Energy Coalition to work to create an ordinance which passed in December 2019 to create the Building Efficiency Program, and we've been working to implement it and now launch it. Next slide. So like the state program, we need to define who is responsible for participating in our ordinance. And we wanted to really keep that aligned with the state ordinance. So we have referred to the state definition of a covered building and expanded that to meet our local building stock. We did a review that indicated that in Brisbane, we would cover a majority of the commercial, industrial, and multifamily square footage with 10,000 square feet or larger buildings. And that would allow us to cover a high percentage of our square footage, but also not impact a large number of smaller building owners who are going to have both the least opportunities and least resources to comply. The ordinance does not include single-family residential, multifamily buildings with less than 5 units, or condos. So if you are one of those type of buildings, please know this is not a requirement for you, but it is also something that can be done voluntarily and would be encouraged. Next slide, please, Mark. So quick overview of our compliance schedule. Brisbane really wanted to know what we were asking you all to do and to be a leader. And so we put the requirements on ourselves first and benchmarked all of our city-owned buildings over 2,000 square foot last year by May 15th. And this year we have the benchmarking of all of the other buildings over 10,000 square feet coming in line, and that will be a requirement that continues annually by May 15th thereafter. A couple of years down the road, beginning in 2023, we will have what we call beyond benchmarking requirements that begin for commercial buildings, and the year after, those requirements will go into effect for industrial and residential buildings over 10,000 square feet. And those beyond benchmarking requirements will be on a 5-year cycle. So they will continue in 2028 and 2029 and so forth. And those requirements really are just to ask buildings to indicate that they are already high performing or begin to take steps to improve, generally starting with a building audit. Go ahead to the next slide, Mark. We do have some exemptions for buildings who are not required to comply. If your building does not have a certificate of occupancy or is vacant for more than half of the year. Or similarly, if you did not receive energy or water services for more than half of the year, you're not required to benchmark. You also are exempt for if you have a demolition permit for the entire building or can reasonably document a schedule for demolition. So those exemptions are temporary exemptions, so just exempt for the 1 year requirement. And we also have some additional conditions that will exempt folks from the beyond benchmarking requirements. So if your building is intended for sale with a real estate appraisal within a year of reporting deadline, or if you are a new building that has received the certificate of occupancy within the last 5 years, you will not be required to participate in those beyond benchmarking requirements and will kick to the next 5-year cycle. And let's go ahead to the next slide. And so just wanted to quickly note, I believe I mentioned before, we do have state requirements in California, and we have a number of local jurisdictions, both within the state and around the country, that have similar types of requirements. So those of you that might have buildings in other cities may be familiar with this type of program. Here in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Berkeley, and San Jose all have similar ordinances. Our ordinance is most closely aligned with San Jose's. It was a model that we used in one of the newest ordinances when we were developing ours. And then I want to be sure to note that those of you who are 50,000 square foot or larger buildings that previously had compliance requirements of the state will now just report to the city, and the city will be responsible with reporting our buildings reported to us to the state. So you won't have a double compliance requirement if your building is larger than 50,000 square feet. So I think with that, I will go ahead and pass it to Mark from the Energy Coalition to talk a little bit about benchmarking. Go ahead, Mark.
Great. Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Mark with the Energy Coalition, Director of Policy and Planning. And we're really excited to help folks through the benchmarking process. This is the first public webinar as we lead up to the first compliance deadline, as Adrian showed. And we've worked with a lot of the agencies on that map across the US, and then also with the California Energy Commission to roll out AB 802. And we acted as the help center for them during the program launch. So we're here to be helpful. And, the advice from all the other cities was, as we roll this out, if you can be helpful and reasonable, that seems to do the trick when going through the first year of compliance. So we're here to help. And I would encourage everybody to chat your questions so that we can have record of them and put them in an upcoming Q&A as we update that over time, and we'll show some resources around that. So please use the chat function, which can be found in the Zoom navigation bar. At the bottom, you'll see chat, or maybe the little ellipse with the 3 dots on more, and just chat everybody or chat any of the hosts. And then at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A by voice. So if we get into it, so about half the folks that responded to the poll were familiar with benchmarking, and the other half weren't. So we just have a primer on what is benchmarking. And so, the very first step in understanding how to save energy and save money in GHGs is to get some data and get some metrics. So you can make an analogy to maybe healthcare, right? So you need to know some things about yourself, and that will uncover opportunities where you can manage your energy. So you can see, hopefully there's a little degree of humor in here, but it's like stepping on a scale, and that's the first step in benchmarking. And then once you do benchmark your building, for those of you that might be new, there's some really helpful things. It's just not about going through the process and putting some numbers in a tool. It's seeing if those are helpful. And so you can compare those numbers when we think about benchmarking, which is typically energy. How much energy do you use per square foot, right? And the same with water. How much water per square foot? And you can compare that number against yourself, against your own building over multiple years, year to year. We can help with some of the guidance around COVID impacts, right? There might be less energy in your building this year compared to last year, or maybe next year. And then what you can also do is compare that benchmarking information against peer groups. So we're going to talk about the tool that does that with Portfolio Manager that really helps do apples to apples comparisons. And you can see it's a little bit easier to compare an office to another office as opposed to a hospital, which is running 24/7 and has STEAM systems. It really wouldn't be fair to compare a hospital against an office or a school. So that's another way that you can make the most out of some of this information. And then you can compare against scenarios. And what that means is if you have to replace your heating or cooling system, you can see if the energy goes down, or if you participate in a utility program, you can really see through benchmarking your energy bills go down, which hopefully would be the case if you do a retrofit. So moving on to the next slide here. The overall benchmarking process is that we're here, building owners will benchmark their energy use, and we'll help interpret those to make some informed decisions. And then you report that, and we'll get into the reporting briefly. And then there's two benefits of that where you as a building owner, and there's consultants, property managers, leasing companies, can really make some informed decisions based on that and report that to the city of Brisbane. It's a pretty easy process. And the city can also help use that to advocate or create programs that are really contoured to the building stock in Brisbane. So Brisbane has a unique building profile because of the size of the city, and in Crocker Park in the industrial area is really unique. So that's the outcome, that it can both help the city make decisions and help the building owners make decisions.
I have a question about that. My name is Celine Cartledge. I'm with CZS Property Management. We have several buildings in Crocker Park. What sort of initiatives do you envision the city making around the outcomes of benchmarking?
Yeah, I'll briefly hit on that and then keep moving if possible. And Adrian, if you want to chime in, but maybe I can give a primer on what's typical. And so as a reminder, chat your questions so that we have a record of them, but we're absolutely happy to answer the questions. So some of the things that are typical is that cities are able to understand what's the average square footage of a building in the city, and is the energy usage on par with neighboring cities or neighboring buildings. And what that can translate to is advocating to programs that exist or people that have access to those funds through the California Public Utilities Commission to say, hey, you know what, Brisbane has these types of buildings, and it would be really helpful if you had a program that targeted industrial buildings to help with process equipment or high bay lights or weatherization of your roll-up doors or things like that. And similarly with the Peninsula Clean Energy, it can be another avenue that we can understand what's there and how the energy is being used in order to help advocate for that. And then the same thing with the Chamber of Commerce or any regional programs. But Adrian, any quick thoughts on that?
No, I think you really explained that pretty well, Mark. And I guess I would just say, I think our first bet would be to go to some of those regional agencies like BayREN, to PG&E, to Peninsula Clean Energy. But if we do find that there are gaps that are very, localized, we may consider city programs as well. I think that we really have to understand what's out there first before we can make that kind of determination. But I do think that this is a key part of our climate action plan. So, we will be looking to find out if there are places where the city can plug any holes that exist with the regional and utility programs.
Right. Yeah, and a big part of that is engaging in a dialogue with building owners to understand what you want so that we can collectively advocate for those kind of programs to launch. So you just by the nature of having the reporting requirements, it's an opportunity for that dialogue. So let's get into what is Portfolio Manager. And so the high level overview, if you have multiple buildings, you want to get those all in one place. It's not uncommon for maybe some big property owners to have different divisions across the state, and you might not know, maybe there's an industrial group, a commercial group, a mixed use group. So just knowing what buildings you have is a good first step. And then putting them in Portfolio Manager would be the second step. And that process can be really quick to get the building attributes in there. There's some really basic things. Type of building you have, the size of it, the year built. I mean, not in the address. And then there's some other things that are really helpful to put in to help put your energy usage in context. The other big part of it, which is multiple ways to do this, is to get your utility data. And we'll have a slide on that. But you get your utility data, you put that in Portfolio Manager, and then you need to review it. You want to make sure that there's all the data is there if the utility does that in an automated way, or if you download that in an Excel sheet and upload it, but it's monthly data. And at the end of the day, you want to get basically energy per square footage. So once you have that, you submit it to the city. There's a reporting link on the website, and Adrian will show that to you at the end of the webinar. And then this is an annual process. So really, we're here to help you get set up for year one. And then after that, you're almost on autopilot, where this is really easy. It'll only take a few minutes every year to resubmit your building. So Portfolio Manager, just to give it some context, nearly 100%, I think 100%, or I can say I know, 100% of cities that have a benchmarking ordinance, including states, use Portfolio Manager through Energy Star. So it's a free tool. It's been around since it's over 20 years now, and it's a federal funded, I guess, a joint program, and it's a tool that's free, open source, accessible. You can look at it and put your data in there, but not everybody can see that, so it's not out there for the world to see. So there's a degree of security there, and it helps you look at your building performance. And if you have multiple properties, it's an easy way to look at all of them at once. And then over time, if you have an automated way that you're getting data into the tool from the utilities, you can periodically go back in there and look and see if your energy is going up or down, or you can see that in the summer, your electricity might be a little higher, the winter might be lower, and so on and so forth. So if we keep going, this is what Portfolio Manager looks like. If we have time for Q&A, we can open this up and go in here and poke around, but I'll mention that we will be having a follow-up webinar to this and having some additional video tutorials posted to really go into this. So this is what Portfolio Manager looks like if you haven't seen it before. And the first step is to add your building. And one of our tutorials will focus on this that we'll have. And there's a number of videos that are out there that can help you through the process, but there's just really nothing like having somebody walk you through this so that you don't have to read a long manual, but the two do complement each other. So like we said, you put your property type in here. There's a constrained list. It should be fairly straightforward to select your building type. You can say if you have one or more buildings on the parcel, or if there's multiple parcels. And then obviously your building's most likely going to be existing. I think there's some activity out at Sierra Point where there's some new construction buildings. So you put your information and you set up your building, and then you access your energy data. So just to remind everybody, this workflow, see what buildings you have, you get into Portfolio Manager, set up your building. Now we're on the access the utility data, and we'll talk about these 3 steps going forward. So let's talk about accessing your energy data. So we are in PG&E territory, and they have an automatic tool to upload the data. And what you would be doing is requesting the data from PG&E via the PG&E website. And then there's a series of questions. So it's a wizard, and it'll walk you through it. And then there's a way to connect the data from the PG&E website to Portfolio Manager. And we have some resources on that. And if questions come up, we're certainly happy to help. And if you've benchmarked a building in San Jose or San Francisco or Berkeley, it's the same process. You can, if you choose not to automate that process, you can manually, you can type in a number for all the 12 months if you want. You can also go into your PG&E account and download your data in a spreadsheet and then upload that to Portfolio Manager. So there's a few ways to do this. And when we talk about energy data, we do want to say that the water data is also required in the ordinance. And I believe that's, instead of billed monthly, it's billed every other month. So you would have 6 numbers to put in. Speaking of water data, there's resources around this, but the billing dates are standard for everybody in the city. So these are the dates that you are most likely to see, whereas your PG&E bill may be a little different by customer. So just know that there's some standardization in terms of your consumption data. And being that right now we're year 2021, what we want is data from January of 2020 to December of 2020. So the full calendar year around that is what's required for the ordinance. And then this just shows you a couple ways of what the Portfolio Manager interface will look like when you're putting a meter in. And then here's the other option of sharing your data through an Excel sheet upload.
Mark, before we move on, can I just make a quick clarification here? So you'll see in this sample spreadsheet, there are actually 7 entries and the data goes from December 15th to February 15th. That's because the city does have that 2-month billing cycle, but Portfolio Manager requires that your data include everything from January 1st to December 31st. So this first year when you're entering data, you're actually going to enter 7 bills. Next year, when you go to enter your data, you'll already have that February, that January and half of February data. So you'll be able to just start with February and go February to February so that you'll have everything, including all the way from January 1st to December 31st.
Great. Okay. So the PG&E portal, and I believe we have somebody from PG&E on, so I want to, say thanks for joining. And if there's any resources that you want to chat or contact for PG&E that you want to leave behind in the chat, please feel free to do that. But the PG&E portal, this is a place that you can go to really start automating that process. And PG&E has a great manual on that. That's step by step. It covers everything that you'll need to do. What we're doing is we're in the process of making that into a 5 to 10 minute video, kind of the Cliff Notes version with an actual screen so that you can see what's going on. If you want the crash course on how to do that. So one of the things that's really important is to do 2 things. Just like anything else, you want to review the data that you put in there, whether you put it in yourself or whether you automated the information. And that's helpful just because you want to check your work and you want to see what the results are. But also, there could be the case that sometimes there's some bugs in the system, or you might have a gap or overlap in data. And Portfolio Manager will tell you how to fix that, and will also provide guidance if that does happen. Another thing that's in there is Portfolio Manager, the tool, has a data quality checker. And this is really helpful to run. So that's something that we not only recommend, but it's required by the state if you're submitting for the AB 802 program. And it's something that we're also requiring in the local ordinance. And it's as easy as once you're in Portfolio Manager, once you're inside of your building, you can just hit this button and it will tell you not only if you have gaps or overlaps, but it might say your consumption went up year to year over a certain percentage, and it might give you something to look at. So with that, we'll pause there and we'll talk about program resources. But I would still encourage everybody, I think at this point, to either chat your questions now, and then we'll open it up for discussion, but I'm going to stop here and turn it over to Adrian to talk about program resources. And so, Adrian, are you ready to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So here we go. And hopefully everybody is seeing the Building Efficiency Program website now. Perfect. So this is our program landing page, brisbaneca.org/BBEP. And I just want to give you a little tour of this section of our website so you know what's here and how it can help you in your compliance journey. Just a little overview about the program here. We do have a link to the ordinance text. So if you're really interested in seeing the nitty-gritty details, you can find that here. Here's our link for today's webinar. Of course, we'll update that kind of with important news flashes as we have new resources or new training opportunities coming up. We have here a map that you can search for your building address and find your unique building ID. That's something that you'll need to include when you enter your building into Portfolio Manager so that once we receive your report, we can match it up with the buildings that we have. We also have a lookup list here that you can just look by address on a list of the buildings. And then some additional links to the compliance checklist, which we'll check out momentarily, additional resources, FAQs, email contact list, and then the all-important reporting URL. So when you have your buildings ready to go in Portfolio Manager, you'll just come here and click this link and it will open Energy Star Portfolio Manager. If you are already logged in, it will if you aren't logged in, it will bring you to this login page, and then you'll see this request to respond to the compliance data. So scrolling back up here, this unassuming little button here that says Building Efficiency Program Resources is actually hiding a wealth of information. So if you go into this section, you can see we have sections on how to comply, trainings and case studies, information about beyond benchmarking. We have commercial and industrial resources as well as residential resources. I'm not going to spend much time on those this morning, but do note that these pages, depending on your building type, which one you go to, have information about rebates, incentives, financing options, and other programs that can help you with your building efficiency improvements. And then we have an archive for our work to develop the ordinance. So I want to dive in here to our how to comply page. At the top of the page here, we have a basic list of the items that you'll need to get started. So these are the things that you can begin collecting if you haven't already, and those will really help you to be ready to go smoothly through the steps of the process. Then we have the step-by-step here, checking to see if you're required to comply with our master buildings list and getting your UBID from there, creating your Portfolio Manager account, adding your building in Portfolio Manager. And we have the Portfolio Manager Quick Start Guide here available as a resource. We have some unique building IDs that we're asking you to add. So we have that information here, the UBID, and then some pretty basic things that we would like to know that are not standard fields in Portfolio Manager, like the number of floors of your building, whether you're getting your electricity from Peninsula Clean Energy, PG&E, or are a direct access customer, and then your electricity rate, which really is not asking for your, A10 or whatever kind of rate, but really wanting to understand whether you have PCE's Eco Plus or Eco 100 or PG&E's E-Green tariff. Basically, if you are doing anything currently to purchase green energy, or if you are using default utility products. Then we have the main step here of entering your building's energy and water data. Here is a link to that resource that Mark mentioned from PG PG&E. It's a very comprehensive guide that will help you through that benchmarking portal. We also have a quick guide for entering your water data. Then remember to run the data quality checker. And here again is the reporting URL to submit your data to the city, which we ask you to do by May 15th. There is one optional step that you can do that allows you to share your data with the city through Portfolio Manager. This is a recommendation but from the EPA and is a really helpful way for us to be able to help you troubleshoot. So we do encourage you to do that, but we know that some buildings may have special privacy concerns, so that is not a required step, just strongly encouraged. Down here at the bottom of the page, we have a tips and tricks document and another link to our FAQ document here. And I'll just open this, maybe not as quickly as I thought. Just note here that we have, lists of questions, and you can jump to any of these within this document. So last thing I want to just take a look at here is our trainings and case study page. We have here today's webinar. This is where we will be posting the slides and recording from today after the fact. We are planning to have a second webinar, so we will have information available here once we have the registration available. If you are not yet on our program email list, we do encourage you to sign up there so you can get that invitation directly, and also any other news that we may have to send out. Here is a link to Energy Star Portfolio Manager trainings. As Mark said, there are a number of resources available from Portfolio Manager that are incredibly helpful as you are getting started. So, we didn't want to remake the wheel with that, but do check that out. Last year, we worked with Byrite and a few other buildings to run a compliance pilot program, and we created a case study about Byrite, so you can read that story here. And then lastly, we have office hours. We know that some people may need a little bit of additional support, so we have dedicated hours for our team Monday afternoons and Thursday mornings that you can just sign up for a 30-minute slot directly. If those times don't work for you, you can definitely follow up with us at bbep@brisbaneca.org or by calling this number here, and we will be happy to schedule something with you at another time. But we do have these dedicated hours to be able to help building owners. Just set up a Zoom meeting. We can go through things with you on screen share and help you troubleshoot any particular problems that you're having. So I think with that, that covers a look at our resources. Oh, one last thing. Mark mentioned that we have a couple of additional videos that we're putting together. We'll have one on Portfolio Manager and another on the PG&E benchmarking portal. So once we have those available, those will also get posted to this trainings and case study page. And we'll probably send out an email to our program list to let everybody know that those are available. And with that, I will go ahead and stop share. And I think we are ready for Q&A.
Great. So there was one question that came in that said, how do I know if I'm using green energy and from who? And so that would be found on your utility bill, which is going to come invariably it's from PG&E, 99% of the time. And on that bill, we'll have a resource with a screenshot on it to show you. But if you're using 100% clean energy, it's something that you would have had to elect to do. But Adrian, did you want to clarify anything, being that you have multiple buildings in the city and you had to go do that yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Mark said is absolutely correct. The vast majority of buildings are going to have a PG&E bill, but you are probably a Peninsula Clean Energy customer if you did not opt out. Everybody in San Mateo County a few years ago was enrolled in Peninsula Clean Energy, which provides cleaner energy generation. So what you would do is you would look at your PG&E bill, and if you are a Peninsula Clean Energy customer, you will actually see a separate page that will say energy generation charges from Peninsula Clean Energy. So again, the vast majority of folks in San Mateo County are going to be Peninsula Clean Energy customers unless you elected to opt out. Peninsula Clean Energy also has an option to opt up to the Eco 100 product. You would have had to proactively request to do that. And if you have done that, you would see an extra line on your bill that would say Eco 100, and it would be a 1 cent charge for every kilowatt hour of energy that you've used. Again, if you don't have that product, if you are a PG&E customer, they do have a green tariff option, but that would have been something you would have had to proactively enroll in. And I see a new question from Christina. We do not sign up with any other green energy companies. Is it required to enroll with some company? It is not. That's definitely not a requirement. It is just something we're curious about. That helps us as we receive the data to understand what our emissions profile is a little bit more specifically, because the different energy products have different emissions footprints behind it. And Raymond asks, and that Eco 100 line item is what we enter into Portfolio Manager. Yes, exactly. So when you have that question for electricity rate, that's going to be a custom field that you're going to enter. That's where you would enter Eco 100, or the default Peninsula Clean Energy product is called Eco Plus. If you're a PG&E customer who has not selected a green tariff, you would just put PG&E default. And just wanted to note, Peninsula Clean Energy's default product, the Eco Plus, is actually a product that is cheaper than PG&E's default product. So rates, I believe, are generally about 5% lower than PG&E's default rates.
Great. And it's also worth mentioning that we did have an early compliance pilot that we did last year to help smooth out any of the bugs that we could possibly see in the reporting process. And so just thank you to everybody that did that. We've provided a few case studies, and we just kind of want to extend the thank you to everybody that participated. I don't know if it's worth mentioning the participants, but Adrian, if that comes to mind, please do so. We can open it up to a couple unique questions, or I can give some prompts and maybe people can chat us or raise their hand and come off mute if they're brave enough to ask some questions. But Adrian, anything about the pilot process?
I guess I would just say, again, thanks to everybody that participated in that. I believe we had a handful or so of buildings that did go through that process. And I think it was really enlightening for us and our team to kind of be able to understand what kind of questions people were going to have and what kind of resources we needed to make available. We do understand that this is not always an easy process for some folks. Everybody has unique situations with your buildings. And so that was why we really wanted to make sure that we brought on some additional help with having Nyla as a Building Efficiency Program Fellow available to really be able to provide that one-on-one support. And then I guess the other thing that I would mention is just, I went through that process of benchmarking our city buildings last year, and there are some places where the process is very quick and easy, and there are some places in the process where there are delays that you need to be aware of. So I would just caution, try to get an early start. Obviously, you're all on this webinar a couple months before the compliance deadline, so probably you guys are the folks who are raring to go. But with that PG&E portal, there are a couple steps in the process where you need to submit some information and then wait, 24 hours or so while that request is approved. So it can take a few days to get through that process. So just be aware of that. You'll need a few minutes and then you'll be done until that 24 hours, request is approved, and then you'll be able to continue on with the next step.
Great. So a question for the group is, how can we best help in getting folks started? Would it be helpful to as for the agenda for the next webinar, would you be able to chat or come off mute and tell us if there's things that you want to see more than others? Do you want us to walk through program fact sheets, or do you want a more interactive live demo of how to do some of, complete some of these tasks? Or is there any question in terms of how to actually do the reporting once you click the link? I'm thinking with the time left, we might be able to do some just quick live demo. If people do have questions, I'm just comfortable jumping in and doing that if needed. But the feedback from the group would be really helpful. Okay. All right. Let's. I wish this was in person. We could give people some coffee and stuff like that. Get the minds flowing at the before noon.
So I see that we have a question from Raymond. Will you have a list of service providers that are qualified to benchmark for building owners? We do not currently. There are some other resources available for that we can share. I believe, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the state's portal has some resources on qualified providers. And then I did just hear, and I don't know that this is on our list of resources yet, but it will be added if it is not. There is a county program that is available to help small business owners benchmark. So the San Mateo County Energy Watch program would be a great resource for that. I guess I would say, with qualified providers, just things to look for are folks who have prior experience, especially if they have prior experience in nearby cities with ordinances, and don't feel like you need to use an external provider. Benchmarking can be complicated for complex buildings or those with number of tenants. If you are a busy small business person, I know it's just one more thing on your to-do list, so maybe it is easier for you to outsource, but for the vast majority, we expect that this is something that you'll be able to do yourself with a little help from us if needed.
Right. And so some cities, if you own properties, specifically in the city of Los Angeles, they do have a list, and they actually have a training process to kind of screen providers. I would just say that in this ordinance, and what the state of California also did was direct people towards the Energy Star portfolio manager list of service providers. It's really difficult for a city to specifically endorse one person or another in the absence of maybe having a local certification program like Los Angeles. But that's typically not necessary. And we would say that, if you are a consultant, being on that list of portfolio manager service providers does, I've heard, generate some good leads. When it does come to the beyond benchmarking ordinances, a few years from now, we do list in the language of the ordinance, very widely recognized industry certifications and designations that we are asking for auditors or people doing assessments in terms of energy and water. So those are a pretty comprehensive list. And again, we've really aligned it with San Francisco and Berkeley, San Jose, and what all the states, all the other neighboring cities have done to really make this easy and consistent for building owners, so that you don't have to become an expert in every single city's unique requirements. I think that we've heard the feedback over the last at least 2 years of helping create the language of this ordinance. So hopefully that's a good thing for building owners.
Yeah, and Mark, and I would just add, you mentioned the information on the beyond benchmarking requirements, which are currently in the ordinance. We don't have a lot of additional information on that section of our website yet, but it will be developed over the next couple of years. We really wanted to focus right now on making sure we had the resources available for this first stage of the program, but we will be working on adding additional resources for the beyond benchmarking requirements in the next couple of years, so that once that time frame for or the requirements comes available, you'll find a lot more resources there to help with that.
Yeah, great. So we'll monitor for chats and questions. I'm wondering, I mean, would it be helpful if I pulled up any resources, Adrian, like Portfolio Manager or benchmarking portal? We also do want to mention, to save the date, we're going to have a follow-up webinar on March 25th at 1 p.m. And this is your go-to contact information. This webinar is being recorded. Slides will be available to view with all the hyperlinks that are in them. And if you do have questions, this goes directly to the city staff. Actually, I think to multiple people. So if you email this, you're likely to get a quick response. And then if you want to have voice help, there's the phone number, and then there's the office hours. So there's also that. I can see, if we do Energy Star Portfolio Manager, this is, let's see. I think we updated this. So let's see if this, for example. So this is Portfolio Manager when you get to your landing page, and
Maybe you could just zoom in just a tad.
Yeah, let's do that. So you have a dashboard here, and if you wanted to create a new building, you can come in here and you can, add a property, and you can say, you have these are the building types. So, there's maybe offices. So maybe there's a regular office, and I'm assuming that it's a building on its own and that it's existing. And then you click this button, and that's basically how to get it in there and do it. And then once you do have your building in there, you can start looking at them. And in some cases, if you have a campus, you can structure the buildings as a campus. You can take a look and see some metrics about your building if this wants to cooperate. So here's this data quality checker that we mentioned. If you're in your building, you can see some basic attributes about the building. You have a Portfolio Manager ID. There's a year built. And then you have areas where you can put in details about energy and water. And then there's this thing, these unique identifiers. So these are the custom fields. And again, this is a whirlwind. We're going to have a dedicated, training on this. But you can come in here and start putting your custom ID. So this is where you would put information about number of floors and utility provider. This standard ID area is where you can scroll down and have your unique building identifier. And if you go to Brisbane, BBEP, this map will come up, and you can hit the search button. You can do directly in here, and you can say 50 Park Place, and it will auto-populate if your building is a covered building. So it'll say, hey, this is where the building is. You click your building, and here's your unique building identifier, and you would copy it, and you would paste it in there and save it. And then your other unique IDs would be here. And then if you are ready to report your building and you import all your data about it, and we have only a couple minutes left, but you would go to the reporting link, how to comply. You would click here, it takes you to Portfolio Manager, and you can read through this, which is some helpful information if you haven't already done your number of floors, electricity provider, and rate. And if you're submitting it yourself, you can do that. If you're a consultant, you would click someone else. These dates are locked in to be standard because we're looking at the year ending of December 2020. And you would say one property or all properties That's helpful if you have multiple properties. So if you just have one property, you can say, I want to submit that, and then generate your response. So people that are savvy can do this in a matter of less than an hour. Some of the obtaining the utility information may take, again, it's a little stop and start process. But we do encourage everybody, start this process early. The Energy Coalition, we're here to help. We'll be around for a little bit longer on this. And then you will probably run into some questions, and so, you probably have to stop and scratch your head and see what's going on. And that's what we're here to help with. So don't kind of wait till the last minute, because it might take a little bit of time. So there will be things that come up that you might not know how to solve. And that's when you reach out to the city and to this contact information here. So with that, I'll pause for any closing comments from Adrienne.
Thanks, Mark, for that quick overview. Nice to see a little super fast live demo. I think you can probably get a sense of how quick it can be if you have all your buildings information ready to go ahead and just jump right in. So do save the date for our next webinar on March 25th at 1 p.m. If you would like to send us any comments either in the chat now before we jump off, or by email or phone. If there's anything in particular you want us to cover, we're still working on the agenda for that to see exactly what people are needing for us to go through maybe a little bit more in depth. But otherwise, be in touch with any questions, check out the website for any resources, and we look forward to working with you throughout this process this year and for years to come. Thanks.